So good evening, and this is my second video diary from Solihull. I'm staying in this magnificent guest house. Two sets. It's the Eden End guest house. I found it on booking.com. Yeah, and it's fabulous. So what's been going on day two? I'm thinking about relationships. I'm thinking about the things that I could talk to you about. And today we've talked about listening, we've talked about setting goals, we've talked about the conditions for a well-formed outcome, we've talked about whether or not what one's doing is ecological in the sense of does it actually all fit together for me, or am I somehow discontent or perhaps what's the word? Sorry, can't remember. But you know, not happy in some way, incongruent with what's going on. But actually, when I come down to it, of all the things that I've learned today, what I really want to do is go back to yesterday and talk a little bit more about the structure of relationship. We all know what a house is for. We live in a house. Flat. We live in a flat. We live in a property. We live in a building of some sort. And so the purpose of a property is to be lived in. That's what it is. It has a function. And how well it performs that function will depend upon the various qualities that it has. So if it's a house with no roof, it won't be very dry. That's not very efficient at performing of the function, etc., etc. But actually talking about whether or not the roof performs the function doesn't actually help us understand what we need to do to improve the roof, or to make the roof better, or to build a good roof in the first place. That's a structural question. So the structure of a house, it has a number of components. You know, we know that houses have foundations, and interestingly, some houses don't have foundations. But the foundation or no foundation question is still a structural question. Houses have walls, they have windows, they have doors, they have a roof, they have floors, etc., etc., staircase maybe. So we know what the structure of a house is. When we start talking about the quality of the house, if we're talking about it structurally, we can talk about whether or not the foundations are strong enough to hold the house for a considerable period of time. We can talk about whether or not the walls are sturdy and made of solid materials. We can talk about their features, whether they look nice. Are the walls attractive? Are they horrible breeze block, or are they nice brick? Or maybe we like breeze block. That's talking about that structurally. And of course, we think that let's go back to the house with no roof. We think that talking about the structure of the house doesn't tell us anything about its function, but of course actually it does. If we're saying that the structure of the house is such that the roof is no use, well actually that's exactly the same as being saying that one of the functions of our house is that we should be able to live in it dry, and of course then we can't live in it dry, and so we're talking about the same thing. But one of them, the structural conversation, allows us to think about and get the right person in to do something about it, and the other one allows us to complain, moan, find all sorts of reasons why there's something for us to have a good conversation about over a beer down the pub when we're feeling miserable, but it doesn't actually help us to do it. So that's, I think that's a good analogy. I'd love feedback about that analogy. I think that that's a good analogy for thinking about the structure of a relationship, and that's what I want to get into. Let's think about the difference between thinking about the house functionally and thinking about the house structurally. Let's think about the way that our system of relationships is built structurally rather than functionally. And so there you are, that'll give you something to think about. It's day two of this rather spontaneous video diary. If you haven't watched any of Peter Freeth's NLP modules on YouTube, I highly recommend that you do. And in the meantime, I wish you a very good evening. Again, I seem to be getting this clicker all wrong, but it stopped at that time. That didn't.